I went to my mountain lodge to refresh and found my son-in-law, his mistress, and his parents living there. "What are you doing here, you old parasite?" he sneered. I smiled, kicked the door open, and said something that left him completely stunned. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Bruce, and at 67 years old, I thought I'd seen every betrayal life could throw at me. I was wrong. The drive up to Pine Ridge Lodge had always been my sanctuary. Martha and I bought this place 32 years ago, back when Caroline was just a teenager with dreams bigger than her small-town reality. The winding mountain road, the smell of pine needles, the absolute silence that could heal any wound. This was our refuge from the world. After Martha's funeral 3 months ago, I knew I needed this place more than ever. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the familiar driveway, but something was wrong immediately. There were 3 cars parked where mine should be. A flashy red convertible, a massive black SUV, and an older sedan. My heart started pounding, not from exertion but from a creeping sense of dread. I grabbed my overnight bag and walked toward the front door. The closer I got, the more wrong everything felt. There were voices inside, laughter, music playing. The windows that should have been dark were blazing with light. Someone was living in my lodge. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking slightly. Maybe Caroline had arranged for a caretaker. Maybe she'd rented it out without telling me. There had to be a reasonable explanation. I turned the key and pushed open the door. The scene that greeted me was like a punch to the gut. My son-in-law, Alan, was sprawled across my favorite leather recliner, the one Martha bought me for my 60th birthday. A woman I'd never seen before, young, blonde, wearing clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent, was curled up next to him. And there, sitting at my dining table like they owned the place, were 2 older people I vaguely recognized as Alan's parents. Alan looked up when I walked in, and instead of surprise or embarrassment, his face twisted into something ugly. "What the hell are you doing here, you old parasite?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Parasite. In my own home. The woman next to him giggled, actually giggled like this was some kind of entertainment. "This is my lodge," I managed to say, my voice sounding weaker than I intended. "I came here to—" "Your lodge?" Alan interrupted, standing up and walking toward me with that swagger he'd perfected over the years. "Old man, this hasn't been yours for weeks. Caroline signed everything over to me, said it was time you stopped pretending you mattered." The room started spinning. Caroline, my Caroline, the little girl who used to beg me to take her fishing at the lake behind the lodge. The daughter who promised to take care of me when Martha got sick. Alan's mother, a sharp-faced woman with cold eyes, looked me up and down like I was something she'd scrape off her shoe. "Alan told us about you, the father who never appreciated what Caroline sacrificed for you. Selfish old fool." Sacrificed. The word came out as a whisper. "What did she sacrifice?" Alan laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "Her happiness, for starters. Do you have any idea what it's like being married to someone whose daddy never gave her the attention she deserved? All those years listening to her cry about how you loved Martha more than her." My chest tightened. Caroline had cried about that when? Why hadn't she talked to me? "And now," Alan continued, walking closer until I could smell the expensive whiskey on his breath, "she's finally free. Free from your guilt trips, your neediness, your constant demands for attention. She told me to tell you, if you ever showed up here, that you're not welcome anymore." The blonde woman on the couch stretched like a cat and smiled at me with perfect teeth. "Maybe you should call first next time, Grandpa. This is awkward." Alan's father, a thick-set man with cruel eyes, set down his beer and joined the conversation. "Son's right. Caroline made it crystal clear. You've taken enough from this family. Time to step aside and let the real earners enjoy what they've worked for." Worked for? I'd built my construction business from nothing. Martha and I had scrimped and saved for decades to afford this place. Alan had never worked an honest day in his life, jumping from one get-rich-quick scheme to another while Caroline made excuses for him. "I need to call Caroline," I said, reaching for my phone with trembling hands. "Go ahead," Alan smirked, "but I'll save you the trouble. She doesn't want to talk to you. Hasn't for months. Every time your name comes up, she gets that look, you know, like someone just told her about a root canal." The cruelty in his voice was casual, practiced. This wasn't anger. This was entertainment for him. I stared at the 4 faces looking back at me. Alan's parents wore expressions of mild annoyance, like I was a door-to-door salesman who'd overstayed his welcome. The blonde looked bored, already turning her attention back to her phone. And Alan? Alan looked satisfied, like he'd been waiting for this moment for years. My legs felt weak. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Not our problem," Alan said, already turning away from me. Maybe try one of those senior communities. I hear they have activities. The laughter that followed me as I stumbled back to my car was the sound of my world ending. I sat behind the wheel for what felt like hours, staring at the warm lights of my own lodge, watching shadows move behind the windows. Martha's ghost seemed to sit in the passenger seat as shocked as I was. I pulled out my phone and dialed Caroline's number with shaking fingers. It went straight to voicemail. Of course it did. Her voice, sweet and professional, asked me to leave a message. What could I possibly say? How do you leave a voicemail asking your daughter why she'd thrown you away like garbage? As I drove down the mountain that night, heading toward a motel I couldn't afford, one thought kept echoing in my mind. If Caroline really believed I was such a burden, such a parasite, then she had no idea what was coming, because there was something Alan didn't know. Something Caroline didn't know, something that would change everything. Martha had been smarter than any of us realized. The Motel 6 on Route 43 wasn't where I'd planned to spend the night. The thin walls let in every sound from the highway, and the smell of industrial cleaning fluid couldn't quite mask whatever had happened in this room before me. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands clasped in front of me, trying to make sense of what had just occurred. Caroline hadn't always been like this. I pulled out my wallet and found the photo I'd carried for 23 years, her college graduation. She was beaming, her arm around Martha, her eyes bright with possibility. That girl wouldn't have thrown her father out into the night. That girl wouldn't have called him a parasite. But when had she changed? I forced myself to think back, to trace the moment my daughter became a stranger. It started small, after she married Alan 5 years ago. Little comments that I'd brushed off as newlywed stress. Dad, you can't just drop by anymore. Alan needs his space. Or, Dad, maybe you should call before visiting. We have our own life now. I'd thought I was being understanding. When Martha got sick 2 years ago, Caroline visited less and less. Alan says hospitals depress him, she'd explained, avoiding my eyes. Even during Martha's final weeks, when I begged her to come more often, she always had an excuse. Alan had a business meeting. Alan needed her to host a dinner. Alan. The funeral was when I should have seen it clearly. Caroline stood next to Alan throughout the service, but when people approached to offer condolences, Alan did most of the talking. Caroline's taking it really hard, he'd say, his hand possessively on her back. We appreciate everyone's support during this difficult time. Like he'd lost a mother too. After the service, I'd tried to talk to Caroline alone, but Alan always appeared. Baby, you look exhausted. We should get you home. Or, Caroline doesn't need to deal with details right now. I'll handle everything. I should have fought harder. I should have demanded time alone with my daughter. But I was grieving, exhausted, and Alan made it seem like he was protecting her. What father argues with a man who claims to be shielding his daughter from pain? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop calling Caroline. She doesn't want to hear from you. Alan, controlling my access to my own daughter through text messages now. I tried calling Caroline again anyway. This time, after 4 rings, she answered. Dad? Her voice was flat, emotionless. Caroline, sweetheart, I need to understand what happened tonight. Alan said you gave him permission to use the lodge, but I did. 2 words, cold as winter stone. But Caroline, that's my refuge. That's where your mother and Mom's dead, Dad. The cruelty in her voice was like a slap. She's been dead for 3 months. It's time you accepted that and stopped acting like the world owes you something. I gripped the phone tighter. I'm not acting like anyone owes me anything. I just wanted to spend some quiet time at our family lodge. It's not our family lodge anymore. I signed it over to Alan. He deserves it more than you do. Deserves it, Caroline? I built that place with my own hands. Your mother and I saved for 8 years to buy that land. And what did you ever do with it? Sit around feeling sorry for yourself. Alan has plans, real plans. He's going to turn it into something profitable instead of just a place for you to wallow in self-pity. Each word was a knife. This wasn't my Caroline talking. This couldn't be. Sweetheart, what's happened to you? What has Alan told you about me? He didn't tell me anything I didn't already know. You're a burden, Dad. You always have been. Even when Mom was alive, you were just there, taking up space, demanding attention, making everything about your feelings. My heart was breaking in real time. Caroline, I love you. You're my daughter. Love? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You loved Mom. I was just the responsibility you got stuck with. And now that she's gone, you think I'm supposed to take care of you? Well, I'm done. Alan showed me what real partnership looks like, what it means to be with someone who actually contributes something to the world. I contributed. I worked 60-hour weeks to give you everything you wanted. I paid for your college, your wedding, I helped with the down payment on your house. Money, she interrupted. That's all you ever gave me. Money and expectations. Do you know what Alan gives me? Respect, freedom, a future that doesn't revolve around managing an aging parent's emotions. The words were like acid. I tried to speak, but my throat had closed up. I have to go, Caroline continued. Alan and I are having dinner with some investors, real people with real ambitions. Don't call me again unless it's an emergency. And Dad, your loneliness isn't an emergency. The line went dead. I sat in that motel room for hours, staring at the phone in my hands. Outside, trucks rumbled past on the highway, their headlights briefly illuminating the cheap curtains before disappearing into the night. Each light reminded me of all the times Caroline and I had driven this same route to the lodge when she was young, singing along to the radio, planning what we'd do when we got there. She used to love those trips. She used to love me, but Alan had poisoned that. Somehow he'd convinced my daughter that her father was a burden, a parasite, someone to be discarded. He'd taken my grieving, vulnerable child and twisted her into someone I didn't recognize. The worst part was the way she'd talked about Martha. Mom's dead, Dad. Like our 38-year marriage was just something inconvenient to move past. Like the love we'd shared, the life we'd built, the dreams we'd had for our daughter meant nothing. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old text messages from Caroline. The change was gradual but clear when you looked for it. 6 months ago. Love you, Dad. Hope you're doing okay. 4 months ago. Can't talk long, Alan and I are busy. 2 months ago. Please stop calling so much. I'll contact you when I can. Alan hadn't just stolen my lodge. He'd stolen my daughter. He'd convinced her that everything I'd ever done for her was somehow selfish. That every expression of love was actually manipulation. That every moment of grief was just attention-seeking. And Caroline had believed him. Worse, she'd embraced it. The venom in her voice when she called me a burden wasn't learned behavior. That was real anger, real resentment. Alan hadn't created those feelings. He'd just given her permission to express them. I lay back on the thin motel pillow and closed my eyes. Somewhere in my chest, next to the pain of losing my daughter, something else was growing. Not anger, not yet, but a cold, quiet certainty. Caroline thought she knew everything about her inheritance, about what Martha and I had planned for our family's future. Alan thought he'd won some great victory by convincing my daughter to sign over the lodge. They both thought they understood what they were dealing with. But there was something hidden. Something that would change everything, something that Martha had insisted we keep secret until the right moment. That moment was coming sooner than anyone expected. The next morning, I sat in a diner off Interstate 75, nursing my third cup of coffee and trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. The waitress, a kind woman probably around Caroline's age, kept refilling my cup without being asked. Maybe she recognized the look of a man whose world had collapsed overnight. My phone had been buzzing all morning with calls from an unknown number. I'd been ignoring them, assuming it was Alan harassing me further, but when it rang for the 8th time, I finally answered. Mr. Henderson? The voice was professional, female, unfamiliar. Yes, this is Patricia Wells from Wells, Martinez and Associates. I was your wife's attorney. I've been trying to reach you regarding some urgent matters concerning Mrs. Henderson's estate. My heart skipped. Martha's attorney. I thought everything was settled. The will was read 3 months ago. Sir, I need to meet with you immediately. There are complications that need to be addressed. Are you available this afternoon? Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. What kind of complications? I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Can you come to my office at 2 o'clock? It's regarding documents Mrs. Henderson left in my care with very specific instructions. I agreed, and spent the rest of the morning driving to town, my mind racing. What documents? Martha and I had gone through everything together when she got sick. Her will was straightforward. Everything to me, and upon my death, everything to Caroline. What could possibly be complicated about that? Patricia Wells looked exactly like what you'd expect from a small-town estate attorney. Practical gray hair, no-nonsense glasses, and the kind of direct gaze that had probably seen every family secret imaginable. Her office was lined with law books and family photos, giving it a warmth that made me feel slightly less anxious. Mr. Henderson, please sit down. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. What I'm about to tell you may come as a shock. I gripped the arms of the chair. Just tell me. She opened a thick file folder and pulled out a document I'd never seen before. 3 weeks before your wife passed away, she came to see me. She was very specific about timing. These instructions were only to be carried out if certain conditions were met. What conditions? Patricia studied my face carefully. If Caroline ever took action to remove you from your family property, or attempted to claim your assets while you were still alive, The room went silent except for the ticking of an old grandfather clock in the corner. "What are you saying?" Mrs. Henderson suspected that Caroline's marriage to Alan would eventually lead to financial manipulation. She was particularly concerned about your mountain lodge and your overall financial security. I leaned forward. Martha never said anything to me about being concerned. She didn't want to worry you, especially while she was fighting cancer, but she made several phone calls to me during her final weeks. Apparently, Caroline had made some comments about the lodge being wasted on you two, and Alan had been asking very specific questions about your assets. My mind reeled. Martha had known. She'd seen what I'd been blind to. Patricia pulled out another document. "Mr. Henderson, what I'm about to show you is a second will, a codicil to the original that your wife executed without Caroline's knowledge." "A second will? The original will you heard 3 months ago was incomplete. Mrs. Henderson created this additional document that would only take effect under specific circumstances. Based on what happened at your lodge yesterday, those circumstances have now been met." She handed me the papers. My hands shook as I read Martha's familiar handwriting at the bottom of each page, her signature witnessed and notarized just 2 weeks before she died. "She changed the inheritance," I whispered. "More than that. She removed Caroline entirely." The words on the page blurred as tears filled my eyes. Martha had written a detailed explanation of her decision. She'd documented conversations she'd overheard between Caroline and Alan, phone calls where they'd discussed my eventual disposal from family properties, and Alan's specific plans to manipulate Caroline into signing over assets. How did she know? Patricia's expression was grim. "Your wife was sharper than anyone gave her credit for. She recorded several conversations." "Recorded them?" "On her phone. She brought me the recordings as evidence to support this codicil. Mr. Henderson, your daughter and son-in-law were planning this while your wife was dying. They were discussing how to handle the old man problem, their words, within weeks of her funeral." I felt sick. What exactly does this new will say? Everything, the lodge, your house, your savings, your life insurance payout, it all stays with you. Caroline receives nothing. Furthermore, if she attempts to contest this will or take any legal action against you, the entire estate goes to the American Cancer Society in your wife's name. My head was spinning. But Caroline already signed over the lodge to Alan. She said, "She can't sign over what isn't hers." The lodge was never transferred to Caroline's name. According to your wife's original will, you inherited everything. Caroline only had inheritance rights upon your death. Since you're very much alive, she had no legal authority to transfer that property to anyone. But Alan is living there right now. Patricia nodded grimly, "Which makes him a trespasser." Your wife anticipated this possibility too. She included provisions for immediate eviction and prosecution if anyone attempted to occupy your properties without permission. I stared at the documents in my hands. Martha, my sweet, quiet Martha, had outmaneuvered them all. Even while fighting cancer, even while pretending to accept Caroline's new attitude, she'd been protecting me. "There's more," Patricia continued. "Mrs. Henderson also left you these." She handed me a sealed envelope with my name on it in Martha's handwriting. Inside were 3 letters, one addressed to me, one to Caroline, and one marked, "To be delivered if legal action is required." I opened the one addressed to me with trembling fingers. "My dearest Bruce, if you're reading this, then our daughter has broken my heart in exactly the way I feared she would. I've heard the conversations she doesn't think I'm aware of. I've listened to Alan's plans for our family's future, plans that don't include you living with dignity. I pretended not to hear because I hoped she would come to her senses. I hoped her love for you would overcome Alan's influence. I was wrong. Bruce, you are not a burden. You are not a parasite. You are the man who held my hand through 38 years of marriage, who built a business from nothing, who gave our daughter every opportunity to become someone we could be proud of. The fact that she chose to become someone else is not your failure. It's hers. I've made sure you'll be protected. I've made sure she can't hurt you anymore. Don't let guilt change your mind about enforcing these provisions. She made her choice when she chose Alan over family. All my love always, Martha." Tears rolled down my cheeks as I folded the letter. Patricia waited patiently while I composed myself. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you decide how you want to proceed. You have every legal right to remove Alan and his family from your property immediately. You also have the right to inform Caroline about her changed inheritance status." I thought about Caroline's voice on the phone last night. The coldness, the casual cruelty, the way she'd dismissed our family, our history, our love like it meant nothing. I want them out of my lodge. I can have the sheriff there within the hour. And Caroline? Patricia's expression was neutral, professional. That's your decision, Mr. Henderson. But Mrs. Henderson left specific instructions about the timing of that revelation as well. I looked at the sealed letter marked for Caroline. Whatever Martha had written to our daughter, it would destroy what little relationship we had left. But then again, based on last night's conversation, there wasn't much left to destroy. What did Martha want me to do? She wanted you to give Caroline one opportunity to do the right thing, to see if love for her father could overcome her greed. If Caroline chooses to support Alan's actions, then she gets the letter and learns about her inheritance loss. If she chooses to defend you, I shook my head. She's already made her choice. She called me a burden. She said Alan deserved the lodge more than I did. Patricia nodded slowly. Then I think your wife would say it's time Caroline learned the consequences of those choices. I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in months. Martha had given me the tools to protect myself, to reclaim my dignity, to show Caroline and Alan exactly what their cruelty had cost them. Let's go get my lodge back. Sheriff Deputy Rodriguez was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who listened to my story without interruption. Patricia had called ahead explaining the legal situation, and the deputy had reviewed all the documentation before we made the drive up to Pine Ridge Lodge. Mr. Henderson, I want to be clear about what's going to happen, she said as we parked behind my car in the driveway. These people are trespassing on your property. They have no legal right to be here, regardless of what your daughter may have told them. I'm going to ask them to leave peacefully first, but if they refuse, I'll arrest them for criminal trespassing. Through the windows, I could see the same scene as last night. Alan lounging in my chair, the blonde woman sprawled on my couch, his parents at my dining table. They looked so comfortable, so entitled, like they'd been living here for years instead of days. Patricia carried a briefcase full of legal documents. Remember, Mr. Henderson, you don't owe them any explanations. This is your property. You have every right to remove them. The deputy knocked on the door with authority. After a moment, Alan opened it, clearly annoyed by the interruption. His expression changed rapidly when he saw the uniform. Good afternoon, sir. I'm Deputy Rodriguez. I need to speak with you about your occupancy of this property. Alan's confidence faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. There's no problem here, officer. This property belongs to my wife's family. We have permission to be here. Sir, that's incorrect. This property belongs to Mr. Bruce Henderson, and he's asking you to leave immediately. Alan's face flushed red as he noticed me standing behind the deputy. You called the cops? You pathetic old... Sir, the deputy interrupted firmly. I need you and your companions to gather your belongings and vacate these premises immediately. This is ridiculous. Alan stepped outside, getting in my face despite the deputy's presence. Caroline signed this place over to me legally. I have paperwork. Patricia stepped forward. Mr. Allen, I'm Patricia Wells, Mrs. Henderson's attorney. Whatever paperwork you believe you have is worthless. Caroline Henderson had no legal authority to transfer this property. She never owned it. Alan's parents appeared in the doorway and his mother immediately started shouting. This is harassment. Our son has every right to be here. That woman gave him permission. The deputy held up her hand. Ma'am, please lower your voice. The law is very clear. Mr. Henderson owns this property. You're all trespassing. You have 30 minutes to pack your belongings and leave. I'm calling Caroline, Alan snarled, pulling out his phone. She'll straighten this out. You do that, I said quietly. Alan dialed, and I could hear Caroline's voice when she answered. Baby, what's wrong? Your father showed up with cops and some lawyer claiming we don't have the right to be at the lodge. Tell them you signed it over to me. There was a pause, then Caroline's voice got sharp. Put him on the phone. Alan held out his phone to me with a smug expression. She wants to talk to you. I took the phone. Hello, Caroline. Dad, what the hell do you think you're doing? I told you last night that Alan has every right to that property. Actually, sweetheart, he doesn't, and neither do you. What are you talking about? I inherited everything when Mom died. No, Caroline, you inherited nothing. I inherited everything, and upon my death you would have inherited from me. But things have changed. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, her voice came back, smaller now. What do you mean, things have changed? Patricia gestured for the phone. I handed it to her. Ms. Henderson, this is Patricia Wells, your mother's attorney. I need to inform you that your mother executed a codicil to her will 3 weeks before her death. Due to your actions regarding your father and his property, you have been removed from all inheritance considerations. Another long silence. Then Caroline's voice panicked now. That's impossible. You read Mom's will. I was the only heir. I read the portion of your mother's will that was relevant at the time. The codicil was only to be executed if certain conditions were met. Your decision to remove your father from his property and transfer it to your husband met those conditions. You can't do this. This is my inheritance. My mother would never— Your mother specifically anticipated this situation, Ms. Henderson. She left a letter explaining her decision. Would you like me to read it to you now, or would you prefer to receive it in writing? I could hear Caroline starting to cry through the phone. Dad, please, you can't let them do this. I'm your daughter. Patricia handed the phone back to me. Caroline's sobs were heartbreaking, but I forced myself to remember her voice last night when she called me a burden, when she said Alan deserved the lodge more than I did. Caroline, you made your choice when you decided Alan's comfort was more important than your father's dignity. I didn't mean it, I was just angry. Dad, please, you have to understand. Alan convinced me that you were trying to control my life, that you'd never let me be independent as long as you had money to hold over me. The admission hung in the air. She'd been manipulated, just as Martha suspected, but she'd also chosen to believe the manipulation because it was easier than standing up to her husband. Alan had been listening to half the conversation, and his face was getting redder by the minute. Give me that phone! He snatched it away from me. Caroline, don't let them intimidate you. We'll fight this. We'll contest the will. Mr. Allen, Patricia interrupted. I should inform you that any attempt to contest this will result in the entire estate being donated to charity. Your wife would receive nothing, and you would be responsible for all legal fees. Alan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Through the phone, I could hear Caroline screaming at him. You told me this was foolproof. You said we'd never have to worry about money again. You promised me. Alan hung up on her. The deputy checked her watch. You folks have 25 minutes left to pack up and leave. This isn't over, Alan snarled at me. Caroline won't let you get away with this. She'll come to her senses. I looked at this man who had poisoned my daughter against me, who had convinced her to throw away our relationship for money that was never hers to claim. Alan, Caroline just learned that her inheritance is gone forever because of what you convinced her to do. How do you think she's feeling about your advice right now? As if summoned by my words, Alan's phone started ringing. Caroline's name flashed on the screen. Alan stared at it for a moment, then declined the call. It immediately started ringing again. The blonde woman finally spoke up from inside the lodge. Baby, maybe we should just go. This is getting weird. Alan's mother pointed an accusing finger at me. You've destroyed this family. That poor girl is going to lose everything because of your selfishness. Ma'am, the deputy said firmly, you need to start packing. Now. As Alan's family scrambled to gather their belongings, I walked through my lodge for the first time in months. They'd made themselves completely at home. Alan's clothes in my bedroom closet, the blonde's makeup scattered across Martha's vanity, dirty dishes piled in the sink, beer bottles on every surface. But it was still my lodge, still the place Martha and I had built our dreams, still the sanctuary we'd created together. Alan emerged from the bedroom carrying 2 suitcases, his swagger completely gone. He stopped in front of me, his voice low and bitter. You think you've won something here, old man? Caroline will never forgive you for this. You've lost your daughter forever. I met his eyes steadily. I lost my daughter the day she chose you over her family. At least now I know the truth. His phone rang again. Caroline. He looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. Finally, he turned the phone off completely. 20 minutes, the deputy announced. As I watched Alan's family load their cars with belongings they'd assumed would be permanent fixtures in their new life, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Not happiness exactly, but a deep sense of rightness. Martha had protected me even after death. She'd seen what I couldn't see, planned for what I couldn't imagine, and given me the tools to reclaim my dignity. The cars pulled out of the driveway one by one. Alan's convertible, his parents' sedan, the blonde's SUV. I stood on the porch watching their taillights disappear down the mountain road. My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. Dad, please call me. We need to talk. I'm so sorry I made a terrible mistake. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it and put my phone away. Inside the lodge, Patricia was organizing the legal documents. Mr. Henderson, I need to ask, do you want me to deliver your wife's letter to Caroline? I thought about my daughter, probably sitting in her house right now realizing that her marriage to Alan had cost her everything. Part of me felt sorry for her. But a larger part remembered her voice last night. The casual cruelty, the ease with which she'd dismissed decades of love and sacrifice. Yes, I said finally. She needs to know exactly why this happened. She needs to understand that her mother saw through Alan's manipulation, even if she couldn't. Patricia nodded and made a note in her file. I'll have it delivered tomorrow. That night I sat in my recliner for the first time in months, looking out at the mountain vista that had always brought me peace. My phone rang several times, Caroline's number, but I didn't answer. For the first time since Martha's death, I felt like I could breathe again. The next 3 weeks at Pine Ridge Lodge were the most peaceful I'd experienced since Martha's death. I spent my days cleaning up the mess Alan's family had left behind, restoring the place to the sanctuary it had always been. I threw out their leftover food, washed their dirty dishes, and scrubbed away every trace of their presence. It felt like an exorcism, but Caroline wouldn't let go. The call started the morning after Patricia delivered Martha's letter to her. My phone would ring 15, 20 times a day. When I finally blocked her number, she started calling from Alan's phone. When I blocked that, she used numbers I didn't recognize. Friends, probably, or maybe Alan's family. I never answered, but she left voicemails. Dad, please. I read Mom's letter. I understand now. I see what Alan did to me, how he manipulated me. Please just talk to me. I'll do anything to make this right. Delete. Dad, I left Alan. I moved out. I can't stay married to someone who turned me against my own father. Please call me back. I need you. Delete. Dad, I'm staying at the Hampton Inn on Madison Street. Room 207. Please come see me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Delete. The voicemails got more desperate as the days passed. Caroline crying, begging, promising things would be different. But I remembered what Martha had written in her letter to me about the conversations she'd overheard, about Caroline and Alan discussing my disposal while Martha was dying. Some betrayals cut too deep for apologies to heal. On a Thursday morning, I was sitting on the porch with my coffee when a car pulled into the driveway. My heart sank when I recognized Caroline's blue Honda. She'd driven the 3 hours from Atlanta to ambush me in person. She got out of the car slowly, and I was shocked by how terrible she looked. She'd lost weight. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her usual perfect appearance was disheveled. She looked like she'd been crying for weeks. Dad? Her voice was small, uncertain. I didn't get up from my chair. Caroline. She walked toward the porch hesitantly, like she was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. Thank you for not calling the police. I thought about it. She flinched. Dad, I need you to know that I read Mom's letter. All of it. I know what she heard, what Alan and I said. I know how terrible it was. I took a sip of my coffee and waited. I left him, she continued, her voice breaking. The same day I got the letter, I packed my things and walked out. I can't be married to someone who destroyed my relationship with my father. Little late for that revelation, Caroline started crying. I know it's too late, but Dad, you have to understand, Alan was so convincing. He made me believe that you were holding me back, that you'd never let me be independent as long as you had control over family money. He said you'd use the inheritance to manipulate me for the rest of my life. And you believed him? Yes. God help me. Yes, I believed him. Because it was easier than admitting that I'd married a manipulative bastard who was only interested in my family's money. I studied her face. The tears seemed genuine. The remorse seemed real. But I also remembered her voice on the phone that night, the casual cruelty when she called me a burden, the ease with which she dismissed our entire relationship. Caroline, do you remember what you said to me that night when I called you from the motel? She closed her eyes. Yes. Tell me. I called you a burden. I said Alan deserved the lodge more than you did. I said Mom was dead and you needed to accept it and stop feeling sorry for yourself. You said I was just there, taking up space, demanding attention. You said all I ever gave you was money and expectations. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. Did Alan force you to say those things? No. Did he have a gun to your head? No, Dad, but you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You meant every word. Alan didn't put those thoughts in your head. He just gave you permission to say them out loud. Caroline dropped to her knees on the gravel driveway. Please, Dad, I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll get help. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Get up, Caroline. Don't grovel. She stood slowly, wiping her face with her sleeve. What can I do? There has to be something I can do to earn your forgiveness. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The little girl who used to beg me to take her fishing. The teenager who made me homemade Father's Day cards. The young woman who danced with me at her wedding, promising that Alan would never come between us. Caroline, do you know what your mother wrote in her letter to you? Some of it was hard to read. My hands were shaking. She wrote that she'd heard you and Alan planning my disposal while she was dying. That you discussed how to handle the old man problem within weeks of her funeral. Is that true? Caroline's face crumpled. Yes. She wrote that you told Alan I was emotionally needy and financially controlling. That you said the lodge was wasted on someone like me who just used it to wallow in self-pity. Yes. She wrote that you laughed when Alan called me a parasite, that you agreed I was a burden you couldn't wait to be free of. Caroline was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. Yes, it's all true, every horrible word. I set my coffee cup down and stood up. Then you understand why forgiveness isn't possible. Dad, please, you didn't just betray me, Caroline. You betrayed your mother while she was dying. You plotted against me while I was grieving. You took the love I gave you for 32 years and decided it was worthless. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Yes, you were. And now you're facing the consequences. I walked toward the front door, then stopped and turned back to her. Your mother protected me from you. Even when she was dying, even when she should have been focused on her own pain, she was planning how to save me from my own daughter's greed. Do you understand how heartbreaking that is? Caroline nodded, tears streaming down her face. I lost my wife and my daughter in the same year, but at least Martha died still loving me. You're alive, and you threw that love away for a man who's probably already moved on to his next victim. He has, she whispered. He moved in with that blonde woman the day I left. I wasn't surprised. Then you've lost everything, haven't you? Your husband, your inheritance, your father. Was it worth it? No, God, no, it wasn't worth any of it. I opened the front door. Caroline, I want you to leave now, and I don't want you to come back. Dad, wait. What if I need you? What if there's an emergency? I paused in the doorway. Then you'll handle it the same way you planned to handle everything else after my disposal. On your own. I went inside and closed the door. Through the window, I watched Caroline stand in the driveway for nearly 10 minutes, staring at the lodge like she was memorizing it. Finally, she got in her car and drove away. My phone rang an hour later. Unknown number. Mr. Henderson, this is Dr. Sarah Chen from Piedmont Hospital in Atlanta. I'm calling about your daughter, Caroline Henderson. She was brought in about 30 minutes ago. My blood ran cold. What happened? Sir, she's been in a car accident. She's stable, but she's asking for you. She says you're her emergency contact. I gripped the phone tighter. How bad is it? She has a concussion and some bruised ribs, but she'll recover fully. Mr. Henderson, she's very upset. She keeps saying she needs to talk to her father, that it's urgent. I closed my eyes. Even now, even after everything, she was still my daughter. Doctor, could you give her a message for me? Of course. Tell her that her father hopes she recovers quickly, but that she needs to find someone else to be her emergency contact. Tell her that her father forgives her. But that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. There was a pause. Sir, are you sure you don't want to? I'm sure. Thank you for calling. I hung up and walked out onto the porch. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple that Martha had always loved. For the first time since her funeral, I felt truly at peace. Caroline would recover from her accident, just like she'd eventually recover from the loss of Alan and the inheritance. She was young enough to start over, to build a new life, to maybe even find someone who would love her for herself instead of her family's money, but she would do it without me. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. I had learned to choose my own peace over my daughter's redemption, and for the first time in months that felt like the right choice. 6 months have passed since Caroline's accident, and I haven't heard from her since. I imagine she's somewhere starting over, hopefully wiser about the men she trusts and the choices she makes. I hope she's learned that family isn't something you can trade away for temporary comfort or financial gain. But whether she has or not isn't my concern anymore. The lodge has become exactly what Martha and I always dreamed it would be, a place of peace, reflection, and genuine human connection, but not in the way we originally imagined. It started with my neighbor, Jim Patterson, whose wife passed away from the same cancer that took Martha. He'd been driving past the lodge for weeks, clearly struggling with his grief. Until one day, I invited him in for coffee. We sat on the porch for hours, sharing stories about our wives, our losses, our fears about growing old alone. You know what the hardest part is? Jim said that first afternoon. Everyone expects you to move on after a few months. Like 35 years of marriage is something you can just get over. I nodded, understanding completely. People mean well, but they don't realize that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. That conversation led to another and another. Soon, Jim was stopping by twice a week. Then his brother-in-law Tom started joining us, another widower who'd been adrift since losing his wife of 41 years. Before I knew it, I had a regular Thursday afternoon gathering of men who understood what it meant to lose the person who'd defined their world. The group grew organically. Frank, whose daughter moved across the country and rarely calls. Robert, whose son turned out to be a gambling addict who stole from his parents before disappearing. David, whose children fought over his wife's jewelry before the funeral was even over. All of us men who'd given everything to our families only to discover that love doesn't always flow both ways. We called ourselves the Thursday Boys, even though most of us were in our 60s and 70s. Every week we'd gather on my porch, drink coffee or beer depending on the season, and talk about things we couldn't discuss with anyone else. The loneliness, the betrayal, the strange relief that came with accepting that some relationships were better ended than endured. My daughter calls every few months, Frank shared one autumn afternoon, always when she needs something. Money, advice about her marriage, someone to watch her kids when her regular babysitter cancels. But when I call her just to talk, she's always too busy. At least she calls, Robert said bitterly. I haven't heard from my son in 2 years. Last I heard, he was living in Las Vegas, probably gambling away whatever money he managed to steal from someone else. I found myself becoming something I'd never expected, a counselor, a confidant, a safe harbor for men who'd been cast aside by the children they'd spent their lives loving and supporting. The thing is, I told them one day, we keep expecting them to be the people we raised, but somewhere along the way they became someone else, and we have to decide whether to keep grieving the children we thought we had, or accept the adults they actually became. It was Jim who suggested I write down some of the insights we'd discovered in our weekly talks. Bruce, you have a way of putting things that make sense. Other people need to hear this. I started small, just jotting down thoughts about grief, family relationships, and the particular challenges of aging when your children have written you off. But as the weeks passed, those thoughts became essays, and those essays became something more substantial. I never intended to publish anything. The writing was therapeutic, a way to process not just Martha's death, but Caroline's betrayal, and my own journey toward accepting both losses. But Tom, who'd worked in publishing before retirement, read some of my pages and insisted I had something important to say. Bruce, there are thousands of men out there dealing with exactly what you've dealt with. Adult children who see their parents as burdens, who've been convinced by spouses that family obligations are optional, who treat love like a transaction. These men need to know they're not alone. 6 months after Caroline's accident, my book, After the Nest: Finding Peace When Your Children Choose to Leave You Behind, was published by a small press that specialized in books for older adults. I never expected it to reach more than a few hundred readers. I was wrong. The book touched a nerve I hadn't realized existed. Letters poured in from men and women across the country, parents who'd been cut off by children, grandparents denied access to grandchildren, elderly people whose families saw them as inconveniences rather than legacies. One letter particularly moved me. Dear Mr. Henderson, I read your book and cried for 3 days. My son moved across the country and rarely contacts me except when he needs money. My daughter-in-law has made it clear that I'm not welcome in their home because I stress her out. I've been feeling like a failure as a parent, wondering what I did wrong. Your book helped me understand that I didn't fail. I raised children who chose to become ungrateful adults. Thank you for helping me see that their choices don't define my worth. The book led to speaking engagements at senior centers, grief counseling groups, and family therapy conferences. I found myself traveling more than I had in years, sharing my story and listening to others share theirs. The pain was universal, the surprise that children could be so casually cruel, the guilt that maybe we'd somehow failed as parents, the slow acceptance that some people are simply takers, regardless of how much love they've received. Martha would have been proud, I think. She always said I had wisdom I didn't give myself credit for. She always believed I could help people if I just found the right platform. The lodge became a retreat center of sorts. Men from the Thursday Boys group started bringing friends. Sons and daughters who'd been abandoned by their own adult children, widows and widowers who'd discovered that grief was easier to bear in the company of people who understood it. We never charged anyone anything. The lodge was big enough to accommodate several guests, and I found that I enjoyed the company. After decades of living for other people, I'd discovered the pleasure of living with people who actually wanted to be around me. One crisp October morning, almost exactly a year after Alan had called me a parasite in my own living room, I was sitting on the porch reading letters from readers when a car pulled into the driveway. My heart didn't sink this time. Caroline's blue Honda had been replaced months ago, and she'd respected my request not to return. But when the driver got out, I recognized her immediately. Patricia Wells, Martha's attorney. Mr. Henderson, she said, walking toward the porch with a thick envelope in her hand. I hope you don't mind the unannounced visit. I have something I think you'll want to see. I gestured to the chair next to mine. Of course, coffee? That would be lovely. After I'd poured her a cup, she handed me the envelope. This came to my office yesterday. It's from Caroline. My stomach tightened. Patricia, I thought I made it clear. Just read it, Bruce, then decide what you want to do. I opened the envelope reluctantly. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a check. The check was made out to the American Cancer Society for $25,000, Caroline's entire savings account based on the amount. The letter was brief. Dad, I know you don't want to hear from me, and I'm respecting that by sending this through Mrs. Wells. I wanted you to know that I've spent the last year in therapy, working to understand how I became someone who could treat her father the way I treated you. I've learned that Alan was manipulative, but I was willing to be manipulated because his version of me, someone who deserved more than what I had, felt better than the truth. The truth was that I was spoiled, entitled, and completely unprepared for the responsibility of loving someone unconditionally. I can't undo what I said to you. I can't take back the cruelty or the betrayal, but I can make sure that Mom's work fighting cancer continues, even though I forfeited any right to carry on her legacy myself. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what you and Mom tried to teach me about love, sacrifice, and family. I learned it too late to save our relationship, but maybe not too late to save myself from becoming someone even worse. I hope your life is peaceful. I hope you found happiness that doesn't depend on ungrateful children. You deserve so much better than the daughter I became. Caroline P.S. I read your book. I'm proud of you for helping other people find the peace I stole from you. I set the letter down and stared out at the mountains. Patricia waited patiently while I processed this final communication from my daughter. She read the book? I asked finally. Apparently. She mentioned it specifically when she dropped off the donation. How did she look? Patricia considered her words carefully. Older, sadder, but not broken. She seems to be building something new, even if it's not the life she thought she wanted. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. What am I supposed to do with this? Nothing if you don't want to. She made it very clear that she expects no response. She just wanted you to know that she's learned from her mistakes, even if that learning came too late to matter. I thought about the last year, the peace I'd found, the community I'd built, the purpose I'd discovered in helping other people navigate their own family betrayals. Caroline's absence had become a gift, freeing me to create a life based on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than obligation and guilt. Patricia, could you do me a favor? Of course. If you see Caroline again, tell her that her father is proud of her for taking responsibility for her choices. Tell her that her mother would be proud of her for honoring cancer research. And tell her that holding on to anger takes too much energy that could be better spent elsewhere. Patricia nodded. Is that forgiveness? I thought about it. It's acceptance. Sometimes that's the best we can do. After Patricia left, I walked through the lodge, appreciating the life I'd built from the ashes of my old one. The walls were covered with photos of the Thursday boys, letters from readers, certificates from organizations where I'd spoken about resilience and rebuilding. This wasn't the life Martha and I had planned. We'd envisioned grandchildren running through these halls, family dinners around the big table, Caroline and her husband, whoever that might have been, carrying on the legacy of love we'd tried to build. Instead, I'd found something different but equally valuable. A chosen family of people who understood loyalty, reciprocity, and the simple pleasure of being appreciated rather than taken for granted. A purpose that grew from loss rather than avoiding it. That evening, as I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in Martha's favorite colors, I realized something profound. I was happy, not despite losing Caroline, but because losing her had forced me to discover who I was beyond being her father. Some endings, I've learned, are actually beginnings in disguise. Some losses clear the path for gains you never imagined possible. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the permission to stop fighting for relationships that were over long before you realized it. Martha had protected me with her final will, but the real protection had come from learning to protect myself. From understanding that love given freely should be received gratefully and that settling for less diminishes everyone involved. The Thursday boys would be here tomorrow, bringing their stories, their struggles, and their gradual acceptance that peace is possible even after profound disappointment. My readers would continue to write, finding comfort in knowing they weren't alone in their complicated grief, and I would continue to build this unexpected life, one day at a time, one relationship at a time, one choice at a time. At 68 years old, I'd finally learned the difference between being needed and being wanted, the difference between family that binds and family that supports, the difference between holding on and letting go. It had taken losing everything to gain myself. But sitting here in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the quiet contentment of a life lived on my own terms, I wouldn't trade the lesson for anything, not even the daughter I'd once believed I couldn't live without.